Sarah Johnson, uma jovem mulher de 32 anos, vive na cidade de Austin, Texas. Ela uma empresaria em ascenso, dona de uma pequena loja de flores. Apesar de sua vida profissional estar em bom momento, Sarah enfrenta uma crise pessoal. Seu noivo, David, foi diagnosticado com uma doença grave e rara. Os médicos disseram que ele tem poucas chances de recuperar. O que abalou profundamente as esperanças de Sarah. Ela sempre foi uma pessoa de fé. Mas agora meio a tanta dor, sente que se afastando de suas crinas. No entanto, evento marcante muda o rumo de sua vida. Uma visita inesperada à igreja local. A história caminha com tom de tristeza e incerteza. Sarah es dividida entre a tristeza por ver seu noivo cada vez mais debilitado e o medo de que o futuro lhe es reserva. O Sen Rio de Austin, com suas paisagens urbanas e artísticas, reflete a mistura de modernidade e tradição que também existe dentro de Sarah, uma mulher pramitica mais profundamente conectada à espiritualidade. Sarah falar de retiro espiritual que promete ajudar pessoas em situações desesperadoras, oferecendo esperança, trave, esta relatante no em que ela decide participar, buscando uma última oportunidade para reconectar-se com Deus e tentar entender o motivo de tanto sofrimento em sua vida. Durante o retiro, ela conhece uma mulher chamada Evelyn, uma missionária que tem uma visão poderosa. Evelyn compartilha com Sarah uma palavra profética. O milagre está caminho, mas ele es ver quando sua fé for mais forte que seu medo. Essa profecia impacta Sarah profundamente. Mas tam uma dixa confusa e cheia de dúvidas. Ser que ela consiga ter fé suficiente para superar sua dor e acreditar milagre para David. After the retreat, Sarah returns home with Evelyn's prophetic word echoing in her mind. The miracle is on the way, but it will only come when her faith is stronger than her fear. Back in the reality of her routine, Sarah faces difficulties and keep the faith. With each passing day, David seems to grow weaker. He can no longer get out of bed, and doctors insist he is running out of time. Sarah finds herself torn between two worlds, harsh reality and the spiritual promise of a miracle. Your mind is flooded with questions. How can you trust a prophetic word when doctors are so clear? How can you have faith when everything seems to fall apart? David, on the other hand, despite his illness, remains optimistic. He knows about Sarah's struggle to keep her faith and tries to comfort her, saying that he believes everything will be fine. But Sarah is emotionally exhausted and has trouble keeping up with his optimism. Tensions rise when Sarah begins to be pressured by family and friends to accept David's situation and to prepare for the worst. Everyone around her tells her she needs to be realistic, which only deepens her inner turmoil. Could it be that she is clinging to false hope? Is she being selfish and waiting for a miracle that may never come? In an emotional turn of events, Sarah receives a promising job offer out of town that would be an incredible opportunity to expand her business. But accepting the job would mean being away from David at his most critical moments. She finds herself faced with yet another difficult decision. Continue with your career and build your future, or stay by David's side and wait for the miracle. In addition to David and Evelyn, other characters enter the scene to help shape Sarah's emotional journey. Rachel, Sarah's older sister, is a pragmatic figure who has never believed in miracles and advises Sarah to move on and accept the job offer and prepare for the imminent loss of David. For Rachel, the idea of a miracle is just an illusion. Pastor James, leader of the local church, encourages Sarah to rely on faith and continue praying. He reinforces that miracles are not guaranteed, but that they happen when we least expect them. He becomes a spiritual guide for Sarah, helping her keep her focus on the positive side of the prophecy. As Sarah interacts with these people, her beliefs are constantly challenged. The pressure of reality, combined with David's constant weakening, makes her question how far her faith can go. The turning point occurs when Sarah receives an unexpected phone call one afternoon. It was Evelyn, the missionary, who had shared the prophetic word with Sarah at the retreat. She felt a strong need to call Sarah and remind her of the prophecy. The miracle is near, but your faith must be greater than your fear. Evelyn also shares that during prayer that morning, she had a vision of David rising from his bed, full of life. This call fills Sarah with emotion and confusion. Evelyn's vision seems so clear, but when Sarah looks at David, the reality of his physical condition seems far from a miracle. However, Evelyn's word rekindles something inside Sarah, a small spark of hope that she thought she had lost. Driven by renewed faith and vision, Sarah decides to take a bold step. She refuses to accept the job offer outside of town, which surprises her sister Rachel. For Sarah, her priority in that moment is to be there for David and trust that something bigger is at work. She also decides to start doing something she hasn't done in a long time, praying with David every night, asking for a miracle, but also asking for the strength to accept whatever comes. David, who until then had been optimistic to comfort Sarah, notices the new spark in his bride. He, also touched by her renewed faith, begins to believe more intensely in a miracle. They share moments of prayer and conversation about the future they dream of together. For Sarah, the spiritual connection they begin to strengthen, the point she needed to fight the fear that consumed her. Despite his renewed faith, David's health deteriorates drastically. Doctors say he has just a few weeks to live, and David's family begins planning a farewell. It's a hard blow for Sarah, who finds herself in a cycle of conflicting emotions. During a hospital visit, a doctor suggests that David enter hospice care, which would devastate any chance of recovery. Sarah goes into crisis again. The faith she had begun to rebuild appears to be under attack once again. Desperate, she runs to the local church in the middle of the night, alone, and falls to her knees at the altar, begging for answers. There, Pastor James finds her, and they have a deep conversation. He tells Sarah something that would completely change her outlook. The true miracle is not just what God does in our circumstances, but what He does within us. Don't be afraid of what might happen to David. Have faith in what is being transformed into you and him. These words shake Sarah deeply. For the first time, she realizes that the true purpose of everything she was experiencing was not just to hope for a physical miracle, but for a spiritual transformation that would go beyond what she could imagine. After her conversation with Pastor James, Sarah returns to the hospital with a new perspective. She realizes that even if the physical miracle doesn't happen the way she hopes, something much bigger is at stake: her and David's spiritual transformation. With this new understanding, she begins to face adversity with renewed strength. Instead of being consumed by fear and doubt, Sarah decides to live every moment with David as if it were a gift, a miracle in itself. She begins to care for David more intentionally, reading to him, praying together, and even listening to the songs that mark the couple's history. The connection between the two strengthens impressively. Sarah feels that no matter what happens, she is at peace with the future, trusting that God is in control. Sarah's transformation is evident. The woman who was once drowning in doubt and fear now becomes a source of inspiration for everyone around her. She starts to share her spiritual experiences with other patients at the hospital, and even with her own friends and family, who begin to see in Sarah a new person, more resilient, strong, and connected with faith. David, in turn, also goes through an emotional transformation. He, who at first tried to be strong for Sarah, now feels spiritually renewed, experiencing peace and acceptance about his destiny. They talk at length about the dreams they have for the future, but instead of sadness, they find comfort in their moments together. Even in the midst of acceptance and peace, Sarah faces a difficult dilemma. The doctor asks her to sign the documents for David to enter palliative care, which would mean stopping any more aggressive treatment and focusing on comfort in the last days of his life. She hesitates, fearing that by signing, she would be giving up the miracle. That night, Sarah decides to reflect deeply and prays once again, alone in the hospital garden, seeking guidance. She remembers the prophecy, the miracle is on the way, but it will only come when your faith is stronger than your fear. With a serene heart, Sarah finally understands that the miracle she had been waiting for was already happening within her and David. It was not just about physical healing, but about the power of transformation through faith. The next morning, Sarah makes a brave decision. She signs the papers, but with a calm heart, ready to face whatever comes. She decides that, from that moment on, the focus will be on enjoying every moment with David, in the fullness of her faith and love. For Sarah, no matter what happened, the miracle was already underway. After signing the papers for David's hospice care, Sarah feels a mix of relief and pain. Although she has accepted the situation, the weight of the imminent farewell still haunts her. David, now with care focused on his comfort, spends most of his time sleeping, and Sarah sits next to him, holding his hand, trying to prepare herself for the inevitable. Tension grows when, one morning, David collapses. Doctors rush to stabilize him, and Sarah is taken from the room. As you wait in the hallway, your heart sinks. She knows the moment she feared could be coming. In tears, Sarah prays silently, asking for strength to face what is to come. After a few hours, David is stabilized, but doctors warn that he is very weak and that any complications could be fatal. Sarah enters the room and sees David looking pale, breathing hard. She sits next to him, and even with her heart heavy, decides to speak. David, you are the best gift God gave me. I love you, and I'm so grateful for every moment we spent together. She starts telling stories of when they met, happy moments they both lived. Between tears, David listens to her and smiles, his voice weak, but full of love. I love you too, Sarah. You are my light, and I am so blessed to have you with me. He holds her hand with what little strength he has left. No matter what happens, I will always be with you. That night, Sarah lies next to David in the hospital, feeling the warmth of his presence. With their hands clasped together, she whispers her last prayers, giving thanks for everything they have experienced together. The atmosphere in the room is one of peace and love, and Sarah feels that, somehow, everything is going to be okay. Even though the future is still uncertain. Suddenly, in the middle of the night, David stirs. Sarah wakes up and sees him trying to get up, with an expression of surprise and excitement. David whispers, I feel better, something has changed. Sarah, initially incredulous, helps him sit up, and soon notices that he seems stronger, more lucid. David breathes deeply, feeling a surge of vitality he hasn't felt in months. Doctors are called immediately. The team rushes to examine David, in disbelief at his quick recovery. Tests are done, and the results show a significant and inexplicable improvement in his condition. Amidst the general surprise, Sarah falls to her knees, tears of gratitude streaming down her face. She understands in that moment that the promised miracle has actually happened, not only spiritually, but also physically. Fear finally disappears, and the power of faith prevails. David, beside her, also feels the magnitude of the moment. They embrace, knowing that they are experiencing something beyond human understanding, true divine intervention. David's miraculous recovery quickly spreads throughout the hospital and the local community. Doctors and specialists, who had diagnosed a grim prognosis, are perplexed. They cannot explain how, in such a short time, David went from a terminal condition to apparently normal health. For Sarah, however, there was no doubt, it was faith that sustained them and brought the miracle. David, still recovering, undergoes a series of tests to confirm the complete remission of his disease. The news is positive, and each new result is celebrated by him and Sarah as further confirmation that something divine had happened. The couple, who were previously preparing to say goodbye, are now celebrating the renewed life they have ahead of them. David's family, who were also by his side during the critical phase, are amazed and begin to see the faith that Sarah has always maintained with new eyes. Rachel, Sarah's sister, who initially criticized her sister's decisions and thought she should focus on medical realities, is now one of the couple's biggest supporters. She recognizes that Sarah's strength and faith were crucial in keeping hope alive. With David's health restored, the couple decides to take some time to process everything that happened. They return to the house where they experienced difficult and transformative times, and together, they begin to plan the future. Sarah resumes her work as a teacher, but now with a new perspective on life. She shares with her students the importance of believing in what cannot be seen, of fighting with faith, even when everything seems lost. David, who previously had a more practical and work-oriented life, begins to dedicate himself to sharing his experience with others. He writes articles, participates in interviews, and shares his story of overcoming and faith with others facing health difficulties. The couple also begins attending religious meetings and retreats, like the one that changed their lives, where they share their testimony with others who need inspiration. In a touching ending, Sarah and David decide to get married in a small ceremony in the same place where they received the prophetic word. With friends and family gathered together, they seal the union that was already unbreakable, not only because of love, but because of the faith that sustained them through the trials. The ceremony is simple but full of meaning. They exchange emotional vows, promising to continue supporting each other in faith and love, no matter what difficulties may come. The celebration is marked by joy and gratitude. Sarah looks at David, and, in her heart, she knows they have experienced something extraordinary. The true miracle was the renewal of their souls, and the gift of remaining together was proof that faith can transform lives.